Hi, good morning, everybody. Sorry we're a few minutes late there. We're just, as always with these things, experiencing some small technical difficulties. My name is Chris Scott. I work for Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland, and we deliver the Secretariat services for the Outdoor Recreation Network. So you're all really welcome to this, the inaugural ORM Members Webinar. We thought we'd start small with a members webinar, and lo and behold, we've got, I think, 70 people online from across the various nations, and about 11 different presenters who are all slowly getting their way logged into the system. So we've got some national updates, and then we've got some practical case studies to deliver over the next wee while. But first of all, I'm going to pass over to Fiona Groves, who's joining us on. You mightn't see her on the screen, but you'll certainly see her. You'll certainly hear her voice. So I'm going to pass over to Fiona, who's the ORN chair. Fiona.
Good morning and welcome everybody. Yeah, sorry you can't see my lovely face this morning, but I'm joining you by telephone. Really just to build on what Chris has said there, we have been working very hard to try and bring something to our members at this time. It has been quite a challenging one for a lot of our ORN members, and certainly since March when we had our last conference engaging children and young people with nature and the outdoors, which was in Edinburgh, we were sort of just pre-lockdown, and obviously an awful lot has happened since then. So as a network, we have been trying to stay abreast, obviously, of all the COVID-19 situations in relation to our members across the UK and Ireland, and also just looking at the implications of how people can enjoy and engage with the outdoors. A lot of our members, I think most of you will be aware, are taking leading roles in coordinating phase reopening around the countries, and are also involved in weekly updates with DEFRA, with government departments and others that are representing those in the outdoors. So the role of our partnership at this time has been really paramount, helping just share that practical advice on how to do things safely and then how to go on to our sort of next steps, I guess. We have been providing a regular COVID-19 Insights e-zine, which I hope many of you are finding useful. If you do think of anybody else who may want to join those, that goes wider than just the membership as well. And that has been quite useful in sharing latest updates and key messages and developments, particularly from our member organisations. So one thing we've decided to do in lieu of our postponed seminars and workshops, one which was planned for June with the National Trust, is not going ahead till next year now, but we do intend to try and deliver what we can by online webinars and a series of those, and this is the first of them, but we hope to build on many going forward, and I'm sure Chris will ask for some of your ideas for future ones. And they are a response into sort of sharing information, fostering joined up thinking and helping our organisations work together in a more coordinated way. So this one today, COVID-19 approaches to reopening the outdoors, is the first of those. We'll see how it goes. Already, I'm sorry we're a few minutes late, but we're getting into the technology like everybody else, I think, over the countries. I would like to say a special thank you to all our contributors who've given up their time this morning to share with you some of their developments. And so I thank them in advance of our presentations this morning. It is a very busy and challenging time for many, so I do hope you appreciate what they've got to say and what they've got to share. So I'll hand back to Chris now, and he can take you through the running order and let you know how you can ask questions. Okay, thanks everybody.
I'll turn my microphone on. That will probably help a little bit more. We're going to work to the running order now. Apologies, it might be slightly jumbled up, but I can see as I'm talking to you here, all our presenters are furiously dialing in on a range of mobile phones from across the country as broadband has let us slightly down. But I do know we had experts from across the nations, from England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, which is a great testament to the Outdoor Recreation Network, that we're able to pull all these people together in quite a short space of time. So we're going to just, first of all, start with some national perspectives, and then we're going to move into some of the practical case studies then, people who are actually delivering COVID-19 response activities on the ground or via promotional campaigns and awareness campaigns and so on. So we'll move to our first presenter, slightly different. It's going to be Daithí de Forge from Culture initially, but first of all, I'm just going to show you how you can submit your questions during the webinar. So you'll see on the top of your screen where the question panel is, a small question mark and a pane. So as the webinar continues on, you can submit a question. I'll be monitoring those as they come in, and we'll collect those into sort of question categories as the webinar proceeds. If you want to ask a question to somebody in specifically, please put that on the message. So I want to ask a question to Daithí about this, or Mike McClure about this, or Rob Rhodes about this, or if it's just a question in general for the panel, that's fine as well. We mightn't get a chance to answer all the questions, we almost certainly won't, but we'll try and get answers to those questions to you if we don't get them answered today. I should also say we're recording this webinar, so we'll be putting it up on our YouTube channel afterwards as well, and we'll also be sharing the slide deck. So don't feel you have to furiously take notes. You can relax in your slippers and pajamas, which I'm imagining you're all sitting in at the moment. That's keeping me slightly relaxed. But first of all, I'm going to pass on. We're going to flick through just a few slides, and we're going to pass on to Daithí de Forge, who is Head of Recreation, who's been busy in Ireland reopening the outdoors. Daithí.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, all. I hope you can hear me okay. The slide feed is probably slightly delayed, but if you can just come to my first slide, and I'll take you through. I'll take you through what we're doing here in Ireland, and in coordination with not just ourselves, but the national parks, the Office of Public Works, and various others. So everything for reopening here in Ireland is governed by this government document, which is called Roadmap for Reopening Society and Business. If you want to go on to the next slide, please. What that is effectively a 5-phased approach to reopening everything here from a full lockdown, which persisted for many weeks. The first phase of which started on Monday just gone, on May the 18th. And in the 5 phases, each phase is 3 weeks long. So each phase is reopening on the dates that you can see there on the screen, with the caveat from government that should the COVID numbers in our ICUs and hospitals and caseloads, should they continue going in the right direction downwards, that the phases move seamlessly from one to another, and if not, a phase will be either paused, or if things are not going in the right direction at all, they will be reversed. So the first one, I suppose, was the very important one from an outdoor point of view, because we moved from a position in Culture, and for those of you that may not know, Culture is the state forestry company and the largest landowner in Ireland. So we are, I suppose, de facto the largest provider of outdoor recreation. We reopened on Monday all of our car parks, all of our trails, right across the country, in tandem with the national parks and other large landowners. One thing I think that's quite different here is that there is a travel restriction on exercise, and that travel restriction, I suppose, really has brought some manners and focus to how people are behaving in the outdoors, because pre-lockdown, which here was on March the 29th, there was very chaotic behaviour in the outdoors. People literally flooding to all of our sites right across the country, and car parks filling up to overflowing. Some very poor visitor behaviours around cars being abandoned on small country roads and neighbours' gateways, and very considerable traffic congestion. So the travel limit, which in this current phase is only 5 kilometres, our feedback in the first 4 days of reopening has been very positive across all landowners, that people are largely adhering, certainly on the countryside sites, to the travel limit. So we are seeing increased activity, but not chaotic activity. That's reflected quite differently in the urban outdoor spaces, the town and city parks, and spaces close to urban areas, where they're saying that there's very considerable additional activity, and the social distancing recommendations are not being adhered to. So you've got quite a contrast between countryside and outdoor. If you go on to the next slide, please. There are, I suppose, some key areas which are relevant for us in the outdoors. The first one being the 5K travel limit. That continues now in this phase for another 3 weeks, and then it moves to a 20-kilometre limit. All the time we're being told avoid unnecessary journeys. This is just to allow people to get out from home, to take some exercise and then return home. It's not an invitation to take day trips to the beach, to go picnicking in the forest with your families, etc. And very importantly, from our point of view, in maintaining and managing the infrastructure for outdoor recreation, last Monday saw the guidance change to allow outdoor construction work to recommence. So all of our trail construction works, infrastructure repairs and maintenance, etc., could all start again. And then I suppose the third one, the cultural and social heading there, you'll see that small group activities are now also allowed around formalised sports. So the first thing that came back was golf and tennis, and then small group sports in later phases. And I think importantly under that one, while ourselves and the national parks and the Office of Public Works, who are the three main, I suppose, outdoor recreation providers, and the Office of Public Works having many built heritage attractions as well, built heritage sites are not going to reopen until phase 4. So that's quite a bit down the track. That's not until the end of July here. Just finally then, in summary, there are, as I say, we've all moved largely in tandem. We have tic-tacked with all of the main landowners and local authorities. We're not seeing the surges that we thought were going to result right now in the countryside outdoor recreation spaces. All toilet blocks and all playgrounds remain closed currently. However, on a call just this morning with the main landowners, we're actually finding it difficult to plot a course to reopening these at all, because of the obligation that's there around hygiene, maintenance, and cleaning regimes. So we're really struggling with how we can reopen any toilet blocks and playground and outdoor gym equipment type of sites. The countryside attractions remain closed, and any of the large outdoor events are not allowed until the commencement of the final phase, which is not scheduled until the start of August. And as I say, just in summary, the caveat is that, you know, the phases, the phased approach to reopening has been very, very helpful, but the caveat is if the numbers don't continue to go in the downward direction they are here, well then those phases may be paused or reversed. So that's me, Chris.
Great, Daithí, thank you very much. Busy times for you there. I was going to say over in Ireland, but I'm actually in Ireland as well. So Adele has joined us from Natural England, who's going to give us an update on the new DEFRA guidelines, or the DEFRA guidelines that were released a number of days ago. So Adele, I'm going to pass over to you. I think you've joined us on call, so you'll hear Adele's voice, and Alan will click through your slides. A couple of questions in there. Will this webinar be published and recorded? Absolutely. We're recording this, so this will be available on the ORN YouTube channel. We hope to get that up by tomorrow at the latest on the YouTube channel, and we'll notify you all via email and easy. So thanks for those questions. I'm going to pass over to Adele.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so good morning, everybody. And firstly, apologies from our colleagues at DEFRA who couldn't attend this morning. We've worked with them very closely, and they're in a series of meetings this morning, so we've picked up this slot. So my name's Adele Rowe, and I work for Natural England on our Connecting People with Nature programme. So we have stepped into this space around providing advice and guidance to DEFRA on access to green space in particular, but some other related work areas as well. So what I'll do is take you through the key points in the guidance and just give you a bit of the thinking behind that as well, and some of the communications tools that we've used to back up that guidance as well. So the key points that you'll see outlined on the slide there, just to give you a little bit more detail around that. So there is now no time limit on spending time outdoors, but it is just to spend time outdoors within a day. You cannot stay overnight. There is also no time limit on exercise, and there is no limit on driving as well, so you can travel as far as you wish. Certain facilities, outdoor facilities, in common with other countries, remain closed, so play parks, outdoor gyms, etc., remain closed. Some toilets remain closed, but there has been a concerted effort to coordinate around that and provide a sort of basic level of facilities, but some do remain closed. In terms of the kind of activities that you can do outside now, there is no approved list as such. So the general approach is that any activity is okay. The key, of course, is being able to practice social distancing and being able to stay 2 meters apart. So where that's possible, outdoor recreation in whatever form is fine under the current guidelines. In terms of what's behind some of those guidelines, we are expecting to see, it's not a surprise that we would see therefore more people in the countryside and more people out and about in parks and gardens, at beaches, etc., because of course there is nowhere else for them to go. So in terms of supporting messages to manage some of that, the key behind that has really been dispersal. So trying to avoid funneling people to particular sites. Of course, that's not going to be universally, foolproof in doing that, but trying to remove suggestions from guidance of places to go is part of doing that. So removing suggestions of, you can now go to a national park, for example, from guidance is just part of trying to disperse people as far as possible. We've worked very closely with stakeholders and have set up a number of fora to coordinate approaches and share information and intel that we have then fed back into central government in order to give both the latest picture and just to make sure that the guidance is doing what it's supposed to do and enabling people to get out, but to do so safely. So there have been a number of products that have been produced in support of the guidance. There have been 2 videos that have been shared widely on social media, both through government channels and through stakeholders. So the first of those is a Countryside Code video, and the second is Staying Safe Outside video, which goes through all the guidance around social distancing. Another thing that we've been doing, which isn't mentioned on the slide, is we're steadily building a campaign using the hashtag #BetterWithNature, just as an underpinning product, really, encouraging people to connect with nature, regardless of their circumstances at home, highlighting the evidence that it's possible to form that connection with nature at home, even if you don't have ready access to a green space, and highlighting then how you can do that by linking with partners who are producing the kind of content that can help form that connection with nature, and then therefore that can be an additional coping mechanism if we can't get out and about to green space as we would like for whatever reason. And in that we've used data and insights from partners, our People in Nature survey, and the evidence base that we're gradually building in that close working with partners. If we could go on to the 3rd slide, please. Of course, when you're trying to effect behaviour change across an entire population, everything is, of course, interlinked. So we've worked closely with other government departments as well. And you'll see on that slide there the complementary guidance that's been produced by MHCLG, so the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, guidance there on accessing public places in urban centres, so parks and green spaces. Complementary guidance as well from the Department for Culture, Media and Sport around safe practice when you're actually doing the particular sport or recreation of your choice. And then finally, guidance for safe working outdoors. We've obviously been working with that with our looking at that with a focus on our own employees, but also sharing that for stakeholders as well, for those in the sector that have workers that are coming back off furlough, how to do that safely, information about PPE, social distancing, etc., etc. So all of those products should then work together. That was all that I wanted to take folks through this morning. I have another commitment to get to, so I won't be able to take questions, but my colleague Pippa Langford, who you'll hear from later, is on the call and has been involved very closely working with me, so can pick up any detailed questions as well. Thanks, Chris.
Great, Adele. Thank you very much. I appreciate it's a very busy time for you, so thanks very much for your time. And there's a few questions that have come in there, which I'll publish shortly on the panel, and I'll be delighted to hear from Pippa later on. So we're gonna pass over now. We're going to go to Scotland, and we're going to pass over to Kevin Lafferty, who's again another member, a prominent member of ORN, a member of the ORN executive, and also Access Health and Recreation Policy Advisor for Scottish Forestry. So pass over to Kevin, who again is joining us on the call.
Morning, everybody. It's great to be here, and really helpful to hear what's happening across the 4 countries in the UK. So if we could move on to my first slide, that would be great. And I think today is an important day for us in Scotland. We're expecting our First Minister to publish our route map this afternoon. So we anticipate we'll hear this afternoon what that plan is going to, obviously the plan in the detail for a gradual lifting of restrictions. And we're hoping for a clear, simple and consistent communication. We've been more cautious in Scotland, and I think we're very keen to take an orderly and a staged approach to reopening the outdoors for recreation and access. And we're keen to make sure that we keep the public messaging simple, and we keep the number of stages of reopening to a minimum. So no doubt many of you will know that we're very fortunate to have the Scottish access legislation and the associated Scottish Outdoor Access Code. So people have enjoyed a great deal of freedom to access the countryside on their doorstep as long as they're staying local, and they're permitted to exercise multiple times per day, and that relaxation came in on the 11th of May. I think what we've found generally is that compliance with the stay local message has been very good, and they're still not permitting people to drive. It's only for essential activities, to pick up medicine, to pick up shopping, or to travel for essential reasons. So that's quite different from what's happening in other parts of the UK. And we've also had a Scottish Outdoor Access Code campaign over the spring, April and May to reinforce the COVID messaging. And that's also taken into consideration some of the public concerns we've seen around more people accessing areas of agriculture and farming. And obviously during the lambing season, there's been some sensitivities about more people being in the countryside. So that social media campaign has been very successful, and there's quite an extensive reach. So I think what we'll move on to is the next slide now, if that's okay. And what you'll see from this slide is just an example of one of those communications in terms of how we're putting that message across to the public. So we're anticipating that restrictions will remain regarding staying local. And we see really 3 stages to the reopening. Stage 1 would be obviously staying local, and there may be some restrictions on travel. But this would involve the extension of activities that can be undertaken, and it would include passive recreation such as picnicking, sunbathing, but it would exclude high-risk activities such as mountain biking, etc. So those restrictions would remain regarding activity, and it would be done alone or with members of your household. So that would be stage 1 for us. Stage 2, we would see, in essence, of extending the distance that people can take or use for outdoor recreation, and that may include day trips, and it would allow potentially some limited driving. And we're hoping to avoid the situation with a tap on or tap off of driving and travel. We would prefer to have a gradual approach similar to what's happened in Northern Ireland. We'll obviously have to wait and see what's announced. Stage 3 would also involve extending activities that can be done to include more adventure type activities, and it may remove some restrictions on small social or commercially guided groups. Now, obviously, this is our thinking just now in terms of all of the public bodies, including the national parks, SNH, Forestry Commission and Forestry and Land Scotland, but still we're waiting on that publication today, which would give us that clear, consistent picture of how we would open up. And then finally, stage 3 would be lifting all limit on travel for recreation completely, and may include overnight stays and multi-day trips permitted. And that would obviously involve some tent-based camping and camper vanning, and removal of restrictions on the type of activities. So if we could move to the last slide, please. So today is a key date for us in Scotland. We'll find out what the route map is going to detail. It will have 5 levels, but we're hoping for this staged lifting of restrictions using three levels, as I've briefly described. Our 3-week review period is due on the 28th of May, but we don't 28th of May, but we don't anticipate any of the major restrictions being lifted until the start of June. So that would be, in essence, when we would start to see a very gradual lifting, and obviously dependent upon the numbers and the prevalence of COVID-19. So if we can finish on my last slide, and that's grand. Yeah, and the last thing is just to say that we're preparing to reopen. The national parks are preparing plans, all of the land managers, but we do have a significant number of staff who are furloughed, and employers need advance notice to bring them back. So we're anticipating this gradual reopening over 2 to 3 weeks through stage 1, 2, 3, and stage 3 could take certainly could take a number of months. So I'll stop there, just aware of time, and hand back.
Thanks very much, Kevin, for that update from Scotland. So we're going to quickly move on now to Dave Liddy, who's a specialist recreation advisor from Natural Resource Wales. So you're very welcome, Dave. We're going to pass over to you now. Are you there, Dave? Okay, well, listen, we'll move on. Dave has been chatting away just there a minute ago, so I'm not sure what's happened. Mike McClure is with us from Sport NI in Northern Ireland. We'll quickly move to his slides, and then we can always move back to Dave as he joins in. So hopefully, Mike, you're with us. Okay, again, Mike has been chatting away to us there in the background, so I'm not sure what's happened there. So I've run out of bullets now. I've run out of national perspectives. So we'll try and get those online and move them back into the slot. So what we'll do now is we'll move on to the practical case studies and approaches to reopening sites. We're going to look at Nick Hall, who is from the Woodland Trust. Nick is again a health and safety advisor, or head of health and safety with the Woodland Trust. Nick has also been very prominent within the visitor safety group and is currently producing quite broad guidelines of how we may look at reopening our sites. So I'm gonna pass over to Nick, who can talk about public toilets, but also give us a little bit of information about the guidelines. Are you there, Nick? Oh dear. Okay, well, I definitely know Bridget's there because I was speaking to Bridget a second ago. So Bridget is next Bridget is head of recreation from Forestry England, and Bridget has got some slides and they're going to talk to us about car parking. Apologies for the technical issues, folks. We'll try and get those resolved as quickly as we can and get those presenters back on board. So if we bring up Bridget's slides there, Alan.
Hi, Chris, I am here.
Yeah, I know, thank you. Just give us a second to get your slides up. So Bridget's slides start with a great quote. Stop.
There we are.
Okay, great.
Okay,
I'll pass over
okay.
to you, Bridget. Thank you.
Right. Hello. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be talking to you all today. As you know, my topic's car parking, which is getting an awful lot of chat about at the moment, alongside toilets. So I've started with a quote from The Clash from 1991. And to answer their question is, between cool confusion and kung fu in the car park, could the weekend be losing that reactive spark? And I think the answer is definitely no. Next slide, please. So from Sunday, the 10th of May, when Boris Johnson gave us the announcement about things opening up on Wednesday, the 13th, we had a very, very short time to start opening all of our facilities, all 560 odd car parks across England. They are ranged from ANPR systems to pay and display free of charge, and the majority of them, particularly the ones that were more remote, had less infrastructure attached to them, reopened officially on Wednesday the 13th, so just 3 days later. And I think since then, what we've found is, as we've gradually reopened the rest of them, and they're pretty much all open now, you get more problems if you don't open than if you do. So I would say to my colleagues in other regions and countries that are on the call today, just go for it, because the problems we've experienced with not going for it have been more than where we have. So the photograph I'm showing there is a location where we didn't open, and those cars that you're looking at are a good mile from the actual car park. So I would say that, and obviously all the associated problems that queue brings with it. So next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just going to talk you through our key decisions, and I'm obviously conscious that these might generate some questions. So there was a lot of talk about capacity and how we were going to manage capacity for people coming onto sites. We've taken the decision that we're not going to open any overflow facilities, and we have made it very clear to our visitors and our customers through our various channels that actually, be prepared to be disappointed. If a site is over full when you arrive, turn around, go somewhere else. And our site teams do have the ability to close them if they become too busy. Our site teams are largely not visible to the public. They're really scared to come back to work, to be honest, and I don't blame them. Worried about being overrun, worried about people breaking the 2-metre rule. And whilst we have had visitors forget it, and walk straight up to them, Generally, they're becoming more confident with being visible and providing more than the basic level of customer care on site. But still, we are the message to our staff is we're not there to enforce the 2-metre rule, but we are there to encourage it. So and we're letting the public do what they want to do, really, and get them into the habit of taking responsibility for their own parking, which they've been doing at supermarkets for quite some time now. High touch points, a real point of concern for our teams, but we're making it very clear again that we're only cleaning those where possible. We're not cleaning them after every person has put money in the pay and display machine, and we're really encouraging people to take responsibility for their own hygiene. That means, and does mean, that some pay and display machines are not being cleaned daily, and we're very comfortable with that. We're not expecting our staff to handle any cash or provide change, and we are fully charging, and enforcement is in place where we've managed to get it going again. So we're, it's situation normal really as far as car parking is concerned. Next slide, please. My final slide is about comms. We've been conscious from the start that this is so important to get right. There's a couple of signs that we've developed and are up in our car parks that have been quite well received, and there's a suite of signs to go alongside of those. But also we're doing an awful lot with our social media and our website so that people are prepared when they come and know what to expect. So the photograph there is actually one of our toilets, but we're doing similar things for car parking. That's our staff there before the toilets were opened, actually demonstrating to the public how they were going to be expected to queue, and happy smiley faces from team members there showing people how to use the facilities in a very visual way. So, and that's gone down incredibly well with the people that have turned up on site, knowing exactly what's going to be expected of them. I just want to mention briefly some additional resources that you might find helpful. So the British Parking Association, the BPA, if you're members of that, you will have access to their suite of risk assessments, signs and car park assessment tools. That's also really helpful. And there's a couple of pilot projects going around the country. So the Lake District National Park, I know, are running a pilot on the availability of car park spaces, where volunteers and rangers feed in to a hot link that members of the public can look at to see where car park space is available, and they're hoping to find a way to automate that in the future. And the New Forest are also doing a car park trial on verge parking, where they're engaging with them through social media, different platforms, signage, and placing stickers on offending cars for verge parking. So they're just a couple of trials that I'm certainly going to keep an eye on, and my local teams will as well, to see how well they do, and might have wider application. And that's the end of my slides. Thanks, Chris. You're on mute.
It'd be bad if I couldn't connect in. Great, Bridget. Thank you very much. And Joe Strummer was so proud he was included in an ORN seminar. We're going to move next to Lee Newton from Ordnance Survey. Again, slight change to the itinerary. We're going to move to Lee, who's going to give us some updates on maps and the online information available. So we're going to just pop down a few slides, Alan, to Lee. Just one, that's you there, up one. We're going to pass over to Lee from Ordnance Survey. Thanks, Lee.
Great stuff, thanks Chris, and good morning everybody. My name's Lee Newton from Ordnance Survey. I just want to kind of talk about maps and some of the online information that we're creating to help manage some of that visitor flow that we're seeing at the moment. Next slide, please. So this is a quick look at our OS Maps layer. So bearing in mind we get around about 400,000 people a week going through OS Maps on the web and OS Maps on the app as well. This top graph looks at the information that we're seeing relating to green space mapping layer. So this is the mapping layer that we've got that people can access, which just shows green space around them. So all of those kind of key areas. And you can see right at the beginning of kind of April, early end of March there, that we had a very kind of minimal amount of people looking. Where we now kind of skip forward to May of last weekend, that's a 33-fold increase in usage. So it really does show the amount of people that are looking for the green space in their local area. So mainly reinforcing what the Prime Minister says around kind of staying in that kind of local area initially, and then kind of really kind of getting your exercise, but in a very kind of localized way. If we then look at what's happening in terms of the place name search, and again, this is on the website only of OS Maps, we can see where I've kind of ringed that area. On Sunday, the 10th of May, we see a considerable increase to last year. So blue is this year and orange is last year. That point of the 10th of May, we're seeing a significant increase in people doing searches on the website, and that to us indicates that people are now looking to go further afield. So they were relatively good and kind of focusing on their local green spaces early on. What we're now seeing is that there is a desire and a demand for people to search in different areas, and that's then leading us to the problems that I guess we're having and seeing at the weekends, with a lot more people travelling further afield to some of the kind of the honeypot areas. Next slide, please. So in order to try and help with that, which we're going to create, or we're in the process of creating a hub of information that partners can then input their own content into. And the basic idea behind this is one that we've seen work very well in New Zealand, where they've produced a very similar website. For the UK version, it's going to be focused on what people can do and where they can do it. So it's place and activities. So you can see here that on the left-hand side in the kind of the corner there, we've got that basic structure already set up. This is in our test environment at the moment. We're just kind of building this at the moment. We're anticipating it to be ready very, very soon and open up to partner content. But ultimately, they'll be able to put in for all regions across the UK at county level, and then all of the activities that people want to do. And then if we move on to the next slide, you'll be able to see the output that the customer will then see. So the customer will then see, and this is an example of kind of walking in Hampshire, for example, will be displaying the current government advice specifically relating to walking, and then anything that we have within the Hampshire area that might be drawn attention to. So Hampshire County Council, for example, might have access to this and then put in actually Queen Elizabeth Country Park is closed, so they can then manage that kind of visitor flow through to you know, to those parks, and hopefully that will then ease things like car parking, ease things like you know, the toilet situations that we're seeing, and so on. On the right hand side of the screen is just the kind of the bottom part of the one on the left, and this allows us to be able to put across practical information. So are the car parks closed? What's happening with the toilets? What social distancing policies are in place? Are the cafes open, for example? So we expect this resource to be able to evolve and change as we go, and we're also going to put lots of useful links in this area as well. So if people are going for walking in Hampshire, they might be going for running, they might be looking for bird spotting, that kind of stuff. So we can then put all of the various links to all of the various partners within there as well, to allow people to get further information on the activities that they're trying to use. If we go on to the next page, please. So this is, again, a very simple solution that we've created, allowing the partners to be able to access and load the content straight into the website. So you'll be able to use the drop-down box in the top left with organisation, then you have a free text area, and we'll provide guidance as to what information goes in there, which guidance this is related to, the activities on the left, and then which counties it's relating to on the right. What's going to happen from there is that all that information comes directly to us at Ordnance Survey. We'll quickly scan it and format it and make sure it's all okay, and then publish it straight away. So then that leads into that screenshot that you just saw a moment ago around walking in Hampshire as an example. So it's a really good way to be able to manage people's expectations. We've seen that there's lots of people that are doing searching for going further afield. But at this point in time, we really do need to manage their own expectations as what to expect. So again, are the car parks open, and so on, so they can make an informed choice before they go. So if you're really interested in wanting to join us on that journey, we've got Natural England lined up, and Fatima's emails on the bottom there. You can just go in and register your interest, and as soon as the site is ready, and so we're just in the final stages of testing now, we'll send that link out to everybody. They can input their information, and then once we have critical mass, we'll then go live. If you can't get to that critical mass quickly enough, we'll probably go live, but you can carry on building the information as it goes and as you find more information. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you.
Great, Lee. Thank you very much. and it's great to see ORN Survey provides this leadership for our industry at this time. We as Outdoor Recreation Network will definitely be channeling as many people towards you as we can. So looking forward to seeing that site ready and live. Thanks a million, Lee.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to swiftly move on to Jonathan Woods, who is the Countryside Strategic Manager from Hampshire County Council. So Jonathan, I know you're there. I've been speaking to you already, so we're going to pass straight over to you.
Thank you. Can I just check that everyone can hear me okay? That's good. Okay, so I've been asked to do a bit on social media. Obviously, we're still, as a countryside service, we're managing sites, parks, farms, and rights of way. As part of our key strategy for the service, we do have a Hearts and Minds campaign that we have been running through social media and web channels over the last year. We've had to adapt this as we've come into COVID. Undoubtedly, you're doing similar in your own work. We have been promoting social distancing and restrictions and access, or lack of it as it might be. Our farms have been doing a superb storytelling about the work that they're doing, especially through the sort of lambing and calf season. So we've been able to maintain quite high levels of engagement. Okay, so if we can go to slide 1, please. Okay, so when the coronavirus hit, we saw our web traffic to our things to do page drop by 51%. In contrast to that, we saw social media engagement increase by 140%, and subscribers to our email subscription by 180%. This meant that we had to shift our focus on how we communicate and really focus on social media. As an example, I'm going to focus on what we started, the story we started talking about rights of way. Obviously, in England, rights of way were generally open, and the levels of use have been extensive, with lots of existing users and lots of new users and family groups starting to engage with our network. Next slide, please. Okay. So firstly, we developed a blog post on our Looking After Nature blog site around the story of rights of way, where you can find your local routes and how you can get involved. Then what we did is we created the hashtag Walk the Right Way, which we have started using. Now we've used this as a paid social media campaign, and that shouldn't worry you. That literally cost us £100. No, sorry, £150, with a focus on people that lived in Hampshire and people over the age of 18 and up to 65 with an interest in the countryside. Now, as a result of this, what we've been able to do is gather an inordinate amount of new organic traffic. So what that's meaning is we've got new video posts, new photographs coming in from users. They've been hashtagging us. That's been complemented by people in their own social media group. But what it also does is it gives us information about those users and about how we can better target our work to them moving forward. And I think the big success of this has only been running for 3 weeks. Now, in that period of time, we've had 22,000 views of the blog and 150 videos uploaded to the hashtag. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving forward, I think there is a real opportunity for us to try and optimize on these new users and how people use the countryside. I honestly believe that we're on the cusp of a significant cultural shift towards more regular daily exercise for families. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to maintain daily, but we certainly should be trying to get that more regular exercise. And I think social media is one of those tools that we need to be using in order to give people that information where they need it. Okay, I think the analytical bit at the back of the social media is really critical. So as we start to look at the people who are providing us with content, we can learn a little bit about them and target to what they're looking for and what they're needing. So I definitely think that having a little bit more of a focus and being a little bit creative about the type of engagement that we have and our adaptability to what people are looking for through social media is key. Okay, thank you, Chris.
Great, Jonathan. Thanks a million. Great to see so much engagement there. And you see, it's a challenge for us all now that we've got these folk engaged and excited about the outdoors, that we retain that. So thanks very much, Jonathan. Really appreciate it. I'm hoping to go to Rob Rhodes next from the National Trust. Rob is head of countryside management. Rob, are you there?
Hang on.
Yes. Hello, Chris.
Wonderful. Rob, we're going to go to you, and you can ask Alan to. I know you're joining us on the phone, so you can ask Alan just to cue your slides.
Okay, well, I've only got one slide, so we can go pretty much straight to that if that's okay.
Perfect.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Rob Rhodes. I work for the National Trust as Head of Countryside Management and Rangers. I'm involved in the ORN as well. And equally, we've been having many cross-sector calls and webinars, etc., over the last month or so, maybe a little bit longer. I was asked just to review what the National Trust have been doing and our model of reopening. If you could go to the next slide, the one with the text on it, I will really just talk through that. I'll try not to rush this. There's a lot of work gone on here, 4 weeks work into a sort of 5-minute slot. So it's going to be very brief, and I'll try not to rush through it. There's going to be a question and answer session at the end if anybody needs to pick up any detail. And indeed, if people want to get in touch with me afterwards for specific bits, then please feel free to do so. Our approach is working across all the 3 countries for which the National Trust is present, so England, Wales and Northern Ireland. We just have a different time frame for when we might be pressing the go button based on local government decisions. But context, really, we started off with the absolute key part being the safety of our staff, volunteers and visitors. That was absolutely paramount. We were also aware that we needed to work at a national scale, and indeed with all the partner organisations on this webinar and various others, to have a coordinated approach within the countryside. But equally, our decisions around reopening specific sites had to be made at a fairly local level, so that the same offer was being given across a relatively local geographical area. And there wasn't disparity, so that either we were opening early, out of sync, or indeed we were opening later, and therefore all the visitors' pressure was going to a neighbouring site, and maybe they couldn't cope because our capacity wasn't open. So balancing the national piece alongside local decision making. We phased our reopening plans, and outdoor sites are most definitely the first, and that's small car parks went first, then our larger car parks, and as we speak, some of our sort of honeypot iconic sites are reopening, ready for the weekend. So we're pretty much in a position where most of our open countryside, so the sort of pure countryside sites, are already open. What we call our pay-for-entry sites, which are the sort of big traditional estates with a mansion house and gardens and things like that, where they have countryside or a parkland element, they are slowly reopening. The model there is much trickier, and therefore they are coming online and reopening. But they're some are open, some are delayed by a week or so. We were concerned about capacity management and being inundated with visitors, and the ability to manage social distancing and keeping our staff, etc., safe during that time. We've come up with a number of tools that our managers can use, either bringing staff back off furlough or changing the visitor route, implementing a one-way system, etc. And indeed, we have introduced a pre-booking system where people can book a timed ticket. Now, a few countryside sites have adopted that, but in the main, most people are using the traditional methods of managing visitor volume. We are also not opening our whole offer across all our sites. So some sites, our toilets are open, some sites they're not. And indeed, as others have mentioned on the call, you know, play areas, play equipment and various other things, cafes, etc., are not open yet. Communications. Our national communications is very much around taking care, being responsible, looking after yourselves, looking after the site to enable us to stay open. And as others have shared, we've produced a signage suite that is in line with what others are saying. So our messaging is consistent. We just got our own branding on it, and that's available for our site managers to inform visitors of what might have changed and what needs to be done during these times. We most definitely didn't and won't be doing a sort of big national media piece around the National Trust being reopened. Those messages about being reopened are happening locally, and you know, that again was a cautious approach because of managing volume. And as I'm sure everyone else is experiencing, and we've just heard from Hampshire that social media is key, and locally social media quickly spreads the words that our sites are open. We do have a national list on our online website that lists all the places that are open, but we're not sort of promoting that. We've produced a lot of guidance for staff, latest sort of working practices, hygiene instructions, the need for PPE, essential tasks that need to be done, etc. Whilst we've been challenged a number of times, the latest go-to phrase within the National Trust is sticking like glue to the government guidance, and that's pretty much what we've been doing. Whilst it might have been challenging and at some stages not exactly what we wanted, we've stuck to what the government have been telling us. And then the update so far, where are we up to? So we started last Tuesday, pretty much straight after government in England had announced lightening of restrictions. And as I said, by today and certainly tomorrow, virtually all of our countryside sites will now be open. We've got some reports of huge volumes of people visiting, which is to be expected. We've got some reports of places that are quieter than would be expected and quieter than usual. And our feeling is that in the main, and there are always exceptions, but in the main, visitor numbers have been manageable at our open sites. But the problem we are facing is where we still have sites closed, then there is pressure, a lot of pressure developing on those sites because, of course, people assume once they've seen one National Trust place, one National Trust green space open, that all National Trust green spaces will be open, and that's not quite the case. So the pressure really, the problems now are where those sites are still closed, and they are trying to open as quickly as possible. I think that's all I had to say, Chris. So thank you very much. Back to you.
Great, Rob. Thank you very much. You've certainly been a busy man, and it's great that you're able to share all those learnings, because the scale of the sites, the diversity of the sites that you have is quite phenomenal. So to be able to move at that pace is very impressive. So thank you for sharing those learnings with us. Interesting to note that the challenges you're perhaps having are those sites that are closed rather than those sites that are open. So something for us all to consider there. Okay, we've just a few more left, hopefully. We're going to go to Nick Hall now from the Woodland Trust. Nick, I built you up earlier. Hopefully you're there now. Hello, Nick.
Chris, can you hear me?
Thank goodness, Nick. I've never been as glad to hear your voice.
We've got it working at last.
And you've come to talk to us all about public toilets, and there's been plenty of questions coming in about public toilets over the message forum. So you're definitely answering a need here. So glad to hear you, and I'll let you crack on. Just cue Alan for your slides.
Thank you, Chris. I actually haven't got any slides. I've just got a header slide. So my plan was just to briefly mention the work that the SG's been doing, because I've taken the information I'm going to give you today from that work. So hello everybody, good afternoon, it's 12:05. I'll keep this brief because I'm aware we're probably slightly behind time. But two things really. As Chris said, I'm Nick Hall from the Woodland Trust. I oversee safety for my organisation. And one of the things I've been doing in the background since this all started is I've always liked to work sort of collegiately. So I've been working with friends and colleagues of mine from all across the landowner sector and conservation sector who specialise in safety and land management, stuff like that. And we've basically just had a show and tell approach and shared what we're doing all the way through lockdown, managing staff through furlough, HR issues, safety, you name it. And that kind of ended up morphing when we realised we were going to have to reopen everything, because reopening things is a lot harder than shutting things. We started talking about that. Collectively, we, via DEFRA, asked that the government give us at least 2 weeks notice so we could get our estates ready. We got 2 days notice in England. So that made us sort of really focus our efforts. And obviously, certainly in the Woodland Trust and with lots of other organisations, we're coping with a 2-month plus backlog of not being able to visit our sites to maintain them. And in the meantime, our sites have had actually extensive use, because most Woodland Trust sites have remained open throughout. So we've had a lot of on-site issues, including random things like people fly tipping hand grenades. So we've had an interesting experience. The guidance I wanted to talk to you about kind of came from that whole process. So in terms of reopening the countryside, about 2 weeks ago, we started talking in my sort of peer group about what are we going to do. Coinciding with that, a colleague of mine from the Woodland Trust went on furlough, a very experienced UK estate manager, and said he would volunteer for the visitor safety group. That led to the creation of a working group with a very wide range of people from all different organisations, including many on these calls. And we have been working on guidance for the last 9 days. I'm pleased to say that as of today, the deadline for comments on the 5th draft has just passed, lunchtime today. And with Chris and Elizabeth's help from ONRI, I'm now going to collate all the final comments. We're going to put it together. Chris has organised a graphic designer, it's already been proofread, etc., etc. So we should have some finished guidance fairly soon that covers a very wide range of topics, everything from basic worksite management, reopening safely, assessing sites, indoor spaces, offices, managing volunteers, staff, contractors, you name it. Anyway, that gives the background for all of this. And what I'm actually going to do is just talk through the guidance that we've got in there about reopening and managing toilets. And the reason I haven't produced any slides is because actually I've been really busy working on the guidance. And we've already agreed in the VSG board that the guidance will be available for everybody, not just the SG members. So I kind of think within the next, hopefully 24 to 48 hours, you'll be able to actually have a copy of the guidance and read it for yourselves. But in terms of sort of managing toilets and reopening them, I've got a bit of a thought on that. And I think in some cases, managing public toilets is possibly one of the more tricky things that people can do. And that, I think, depends largely on the nature of the toilet. They range from, single occupancy toilets down a long corridor in a National Trust property through to big modern toilets on a modern visitor centre, through to simple brick toilet blocks on the edge of a car park in a forest. And I think the first message I give out, which is a common message that we put out with the VSG, is only do something if you are happy it's safe to do so. Don't feel pressured to open facilities because of outside influences. Here in the Woodland Trust, we've had lots of pressure to open car parks. And our view has been very simply, we will do happily if we believe it's safe. If we don't believe it's safe, then we won't. And I think that's probably the first and most important message. In terms of actually sort of process, I think the actual process for doing it is comparatively simple. One of the first things to mention is that obviously the toilets could well have been unoccupied and unused for a couple of months, and the HSE, Health and Safety Executive, for anybody that's not from the UK, are concerned about the possibility of Legionella build-up. Obviously, you probably are aware that Legionella builds up in water systems that are closed where the water is kept warm. And their concern would be is if we just started going and, flushing toilets again and using them as you would normally use them, there could be a spike in Legionella cases. So there is some simple guidance in the VSG document about how you go about preventing that. And there's 2 ways of doing it. The first one is to, if you have simple basic toilets, a couple of toilets, urinals, sinks, etc. You go in, open the windows, open the doors, air it out, flush, close the toilet lids, flush the toilets at least twice, and then run all of the taps on a low to medium pressure so it isn't spraying everywhere for at least 2 minutes, and let it all air out. That's for small or simple toilets. The advice basically also says if you have a more complex building, like a big visitor centre or a big stately home, it's advisable to get specialist advice in to check your system, conduct water hygiene tests, etc. And if you have those buildings already, you probably already have a water hygienist on standby. In terms of managing toilets, I think there's a number of things to talk about. We've looked at single-person toilets, and we think that single-person toilets, like just a simple toilet at a door, may well need a queuing system with floor markings and a sign saying one person in, one person out. For multi-person units and larger facilities, we said where privacy can be maintained, leave the external doors open. When I say leave them open, I mean secure them open, because otherwise somebody may shut them. So you secure them open with a wedge, or if possible, a latch or chain or bolt. In terms of inside the toilet itself, we recommended that every alternate urinal in the men's facilities and the sinks in all facilities are closed off, so that basically forces social distancing. That doesn't have to be anything complicated or technological. You can simply use plastic sheeting or a bin bag and some stripy hazard tape to close things off temporarily. If it's a large facility, then you could consider putting in floor markings, a one-way system, etc., to actually manage the flow around the building. One of the things we said is wherever toilets have got windows, we would advise leaving them open as far as possible, certainly during the day of occupancy when they're being used, because ventilation is actually key to helping manage this disease, because the water droplets that come from people cough and sneeze and this sort of thing are actually airborne. We've said that all toilets should be cleaned thoroughly at least twice daily, and that should include, scrubbing everything down with disinfectant, scrubbing the floor, a thorough deep clean, effectively. And that's a minimum. I would suggest to you that you should actually focus on your own risk assessments. If you have very busy, very heavily occupied toilets, you may want to increase that ratio. It's entirely up to you to make those decisions. It's your risk assessment. We've said that disposable paper towels or hand dryers should be provided in the toilets. That's in line with sort of government advice. And we should obviously avoid fabric or microfiber towels or anything that will sort of reside there. If you are using disposable paper towels, obviously the regular disposal of waste will be key, and that will need to be removed, and that should be done as part of your cleaning regime and should be managed. In terms of portaloos, we've actually mentioned that as well. We've said portaloos should be located 6 feet apart, and if they are going to be used and facilitated, they should be cleaned to the same regime as any other toilet. So portaloos should be thoroughly disinfected and cleaned down at least twice daily, more if your risk assessment says so. In terms of toilet cleaning and safety of cleaners, we've mentioned that, and we've said that first of all, toilets should be closed for at least 15-20 minutes and allowed to air out before cleaners go in there. This should remove the residual risk of any airborne sort of contaminants lying around. And in general, we feel that cleaners' regular PPE should be fine. So, gloves and overalls and that sort of stuff. They're going to be using extensive disinfectants and bleach. And however, if for some reason there is a specific risk you feel, we're advising people to consider through their own risk assessments whether more PPE is provided. So, for example, if it is possible that a cleaner could get water or other substances onto their faces, then they might need to have a visor. I would suggest this is unlikely, because most cleaners I ever come across try to avoid getting anything on their faces from toilets in general, never mind during COVID. And the main risk will be from contact with their hands and with surfaces. So as long as they're wearing disposable gloves, which are disposed of, and then they sanitize their hands afterwards, or they're wearing washable gloves, which are disinfected afterwards, and then likewise they sanitize their hands, the risk should be minimal. So that's kind of a potted version of the written guidance that's coming out in the VSG for managing toilets. Nothing else to add on that. Chris, was that what you were hoping for?
That was great, Nick. Thank you very much. And it's the questions come in, it's slowed down, so you must be answering some of people's questions there, which is great. And we'll look forward to those VSG guidelines coming out hopefully next week. And I've cited them. We also run the VSG Secretariat, so some great detail in there and great collaboration from experts across the sector. ORN was also delighted to endorse and commend the recommendations as well. So thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, we're gonna pass on now, hopefully, to Stephen Jenkinson. Are you with us, Stephen?
Yeah, I can hear you. How about for you, Chris?
Wonderful, delighted to hear your voice. So Stephen helped us out with an ORN seminar way back February last in Thetford. We ran it along with Forestry England. So Stephen's from the Kennel Club, and I'm not going to talk too much longer because I know we're tight for time. So Stephen, you can give us a brief update on managing walkers with dogs. Thanks, Stephen.
Absolutely, thanks, Chris. Good afternoon to everybody. As some of you may well know, I'm a self-employed specialist in managing dogs in the outdoors, and I'm speaking to you today supported by the Kennel Club. But the advice I'm giving you would be exactly the same if I was working directly for you, because good management benefits everybody. While I'm based in Scotland, I do work all over UK and Ireland. So what I've tried to do is pull out generic themes that then you can apply to the different countries that you're working in to fit the different social and legal framework that you have. If you could advance the slide, please. As Bridget and quite a few other people have said, car parking is a key issue, and I don't need to say too much about that. As I say, in a lot of sites, people were still visiting those sites that they could walk to. And it reminds me that, as ever in access management, the top three things we seem to always deal with are car parks, toilets and dogs. So we've ticked all those boxes. I still don't see the slide. Oh, yeah, there we are. Brilliant. Sorry for the delay. One of the key things for me, and a lesson from when we exited from the restrictions to foot and mouth in 2001, while I've heard people say to me, and I appreciate their honesty about, oh, this could be a good opportunity to make permanent, not reopening that car park or leaving that trail shut or whatever. This really isn't the time. When that was tried post foot and mouth, it got really quite nasty. People felt they'd, been compliant with staying away from the routes that they're passionate about. And then when they feel that that's been turned on its head and used, to justify a longer term restriction, it got really, really nasty. Restrictions are needed at some times, but do it in the usual open way when things have turned down. Don't try and manipulate it to your advantage, because it really didn't start well. One of the other things which hasn't been mentioned is that in various parts, you'll have no dogs or on lead zones, which have been introduced in whatever normal is, situations where you're wanting to provide choice for people to be near or not near dogs. But because some of those restrictions, depending where you are, aren't necessarily appropriate at the moment, for example, sports pitches not being used, in some areas people are still not allowed to go and sunbathe outside England, that actually if you're looking to do a bit more dispersal, as Adele was talking about at the start, temporarily relaxing some of those can be really helpful. And I make the point that actually that doesn't need to be a formal legal process. In pretty much all the legislation across all the countries, you can give people just a reasonable excuse not to comply with them. And just by putting up a sign that's saying, for the moment, you can walk your dog here or whatever, that can be just a really good way of doing it. The other key thing as well is just making sure you've marked up your litter bins, if you're not already done so, to just make sure that people know that they can use those for bagged waste, because at the moment there may not be as many collections being done. And also, ideally, people will take bagged dog poo home, but actually if we can just avoid it being left on site, it's fine. And there's an example of a sign there. If we could have the next slide, please. As ever through the whole COVID-19 issue, trying to be clear about the messaging is really, really important. We've seen the difference between what was seen to be a clear message in terms of things like stay at home compared to stay alert, and how clear are these things. And the same applies to dogs as it does any other visitor. And the key thing to remember as well is that when you're doing signage about where people with dogs can go and what they can do, it's also communicating to people without dogs about what's the expectation and what is responsible or irresponsible behaviour. And just looking on the slide in the top right, just in some of the communications that I've seen coming out, there's this little infographic which has been produced. And I just put out the question, so what is that saying? Is that dogs on the lead? If I was a dog owner or non-dog owner, what would be the expected behaviour there? Whereas if you can just advance the slide again, we can actually look and see what the messaging is behind it. And it isn't exactly clear. So actually, if you're expecting people to have dogs on a lead, be clear about it, or if they can be off lead, if kept under control, be clear about that, because otherwise people will interpret signage to suit their particular views of the world, and that doesn't always help. Just as a general thing, while that slide comes up, dogs on the lead generally doesn't work because for 85% of dog owners, off-lead exercise is the single most important thing to them. And if you do even enforce that, what will happen is it will just displace activities to elsewhere. And as you can just see on the slide there, so underneath the logo with a dog on a lead, actually the written message underneath it is keep dogs under control. Is that on the lead? Is it not on the lead? So you can see how the difficulties appear. I've got some better wording for you a bit further down. But there's a good message there as well. Don't let dogs approach or chase any animals, because that's a very clear message that you can measure. I always say if you can measure a behaviour, then it's a good message you're describing. So just on that, traditionally still we see people using terms like close control or walk your dog considerately. But there's been some great work done in a few different countries about getting more behaviourally described messages, which is really important. So, for example, in the dog walking code for England and Wales, which is a subset of the countryside code, there in 2015, we had the message coming up from a work with a number of stakeholders: prevent your dog from approaching other horse riders, cyclists, or other people and their dogs uninvited. And that's particularly relevant at the moment because apart from, dogs not running up to people anyway being acceptable, if a dog runs up to somebody, then it's more likely that the owner will then come and get it and say, oh, I'm sorry, but then they're going to be breaking the social distance rules. So that's a message that I would encourage people to think about. And again, just earlier this year, the National Access Forum did something similar. The message there being, don't allow your dog to approach animals or people uninvited. So again, in terms of social distancing, often we'll be talking about poo and other stuff, but those are some really key ones that traditionally haven't been in the countryside codes. And also remember, if there's been some temporary change, do cover or remove the signage that doesn't apply, rather than saying, oh yeah, that's not for at the moment. We can't expect people to interpret which messages are right and which messages are wrong. Just cover or replace. So if you go on to my final slide, please. And again, do feel free to follow up on any of this afterwards. The email address was at the start. But like everything, this is a people management issue. As much as we can look at technicalities and think about livestock or wildlife, at the end of the day, this is all about managing people in the outdoors. And as in foot and mouth, people will have really high expectations for access back to their green spaces. And I know that can make for some really quite difficult conversations when people can seem to have a sense of entitlement. But they're also passionate about the resource we're trying to maintain resources for. And that's, to me, going to be even more challenging in the future. So actually, you might need to bite your tongue, but I would actually say if people are passionate about walking there, that's the most important thing. Because to me, apathy about access or funding is the real danger. Also to see as an opportunity to engage with people. And as has been mentioned about social media, yes, it can be a good tool, but if people have bad experiences, it can readily allow those to fester. And actually, we want people to value the resource we manage. Also remember as well, when you're just seeing something that you don't really like, the benefits of dog walking. Alas, in Hampshire and in Dorset, we've seen increased fires on heathland, increased rural crime elsewhere, and antisocial behaviour, because there hasn't been that as much informal surveillance that dog walkers provide when they're out and about. And a horrific fire down in Wareham in Dorset just recently. So again, think of the benefits. Final point, commercial dog walkers, which is a gnarly issue for quite a few people as well. Just to be aware that throughout the restrictions, they've kept working because apart from it being a job that you can't do from home, having somebody else walk your dog is really important for people who are key workers, and also it helps people who are self-isolating stay at home and not be tempted to go out. And there is a formal protocol for if you're walking a dog for somebody else who might be at risk or in a vulnerable situation. And for that and so much more, on the front page of the Kennel Club website, you can see the address there. If you look in the top right-hand corner, there's a couple of image links, one about general guidance for members of the public in terms of coronavirus, but also information for local authorities and animal-related businesses as well. So there's a lot there. It's being kept up all the time as best they can. Otherwise, just do feel free to come back to me and I'll be here to the end. And as ever, toilets, car parking and dogs, what more is there to deal with? Thank you, Chris.
Great, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed. And I see a few questions coming in there, so we'll definitely come back to you. So that is the end of all our practical case studies. I think we haven't missed anybody out, have I? No, I've got through everybody, so that was great. We did miss out a few national perspectives at the start, and I still say we've still got just over 70 people still online from our original 77. So you're all still there, you're all staying engaged, and you're all still asking questions. So we're gonna keep going. If you start dropping offline, we'll maybe draw to a close. But we'll keep going for now. And I know Dave has put a bit of work into his presentation, so I want to give him an opportunity to let us know what's going on in Wales. Are you there, Dave?
Hi there. Can you hear me, Chris?
Again, delighted to hear you, Dave. Delighted to hear you. So Dave is again a board member on VSG, and I know he's here representing Joe Roberts, who's a board member on ORN. So very welcome, Dave. Delighted to have you along. Delighted to hear you. And you can just cue your slides with Alan. We'll get cracking.
Sure. Okay. We can move on to that first slide then, please. And we might stick with that through my presentation. I think, given where we are and given all the useful advice that we've been hearing through the session, my presentation will be pretty short because, of course, Wales, small nation that it is, it's definitely not England, and we're absolutely still in lockdown. You can see that on the 15th of May, the Welsh Government announced their traffic light system for opening up post-COVID, and so we've got these 4 different boxes here. We've got what people can expect their contacts to be, top left, how they're going to engage increasingly in cultural activity and events. Bottom left is about what they're going to be able to do for exercise. Bottom right is talking about travel. And so Natural Resources Wales, my employer, we closed all our car parks, visitor centres, play areas, mountain bike trails, Monday 23rd of March, as I'm sure most of you all did. We were in the black lockdown part of this traffic light approach. We've taken various measures as appropriate on the site and to discourage, deny, inform, or to absolutely prevent access to our sites. And we've tried to do that based on that visitor safety group, risk matrix spectrum. We've had to put more efforts into our heavily developed sites. They were going to be under more pressure. There's going to be more people rocking up. And so we've had to take more action in those sites. Equally, a little lay-by, a little pull-in on some forest road in some godforsaken upland wilderness by a conifer forest where people might have gone to walk their dog. Well, we've simply not done anything in some of those sites. And so we've always tried to guide our approach, even in a COVID scenario, based on that VSG matrix. And that's exactly what we'll be doing when it comes to reopening. At less developed and completely undeveloped sites, yes, we'll have to consider control measures about pedestrian pinch points, but those aren't our honeypot sites. We're not expecting a lot of people there, and mostly a lot of those sites will simply be letting the public sort themselves out. They've been doing it in supermarket car parks, and we don't expect to take action. On our busier sites, at the developed end of that visitor safety spectrum, then we're going to need to take more action. You can see that taking this phased approach, we're already drifting into exercise more than once a day. So we've already got a little bit of inconsistency following this traffic light approach that the Welsh Government talks about, and they update that guidance. As we move from black to red, local travel will become possible, and that's going to be difficult. It would be a lot easier if we had a proper definition from the Welsh Government about exactly what that local definition means. It's not defined very clearly. I can see why they don't want to define it. It's 28 miles for me to go from home just to go shopping in Sainsbury's. So what's my definition of local is going to be fundamentally different from somebody in the middle of Cardiff and their definition. So we're going to be unlocking all of our sites, thinking about what we're doing based on this traffic light approach. The Welsh Government also have the caveat that they're going to progress through the stages guided by the science and the numbers. Some of our busiest sites, such as Newborough, Sand Dune Beach car park, are going to be an enormous challenge for us. What we do with the toilet block, whether, the question of opening the car park has to go hand in hand with opening the toilet block, and that's not going to be straightforward given the layout. So we're still working on things like that. Our social media messages are about encouraging people to plan their visit. We're going to work quite hard on that across a range of platforms. It's about encouraging people to think about where they're going. Do they want to go to that honeypot site, given the current restrictions that are going to be in place, given all of the difficulties that they're going to have in ensuring that they are socially distant from other people. They're not going to want to rock up between 10:30 and midday, because that's when everybody else is going to want to rock up, and that's going to be when our sites are under most pressure. So our social media is about encouraging people to plan their visits, how they're going to best be able to do social distancing. I'll finish on the remaining challenge. Some of our big events, and the biggest of ours is Wales Rally GB, with over 1,000 spectators, all of whom stand looking over each other's shoulders, peering at some racing cars going through the forest. I'm not sure that that's going to be possible at all until all restrictions are absolutely lifted, and so that's a challenging area. So that's where we are in Wales with our phased approach. I'll leave it there.
Dave, thank you very much. Really clear, easy to follow approach there, and great to see it tying up with the VSG matrix. So thanks again for sharing all that, and we'll make sure we obviously get your other slides out on the slide deck, and we share it with delegates as well, because there's some great examples of signage and so on that as well, Dave. So thank you very much. So hopefully we can hear now the very last quick presentation from Mike. Are you there, Mike?
Can you hear me, Chris? I can.
Welcome.
The last time I was talking.
So you've got minus 10 minutes, Mike, to do your presentation. So I'm just going to pass straight over to you. Many will know Mike, ex-vice chair of ORN, leading light within ORN in the past, now moved on to BOSS, which we've heard from at previous conferences. But he's going to tell us a little bit about the approach in Northern Ireland. I'm going to pass straight over to you, Mike, and Alan will cue your slides.
Great, thanks so much, Alan. Go ahead and put the first slide up. That'd be great. I was talking away the last time and nobody was listening, and it just feels like a bit of the story of my life sometimes, So just to fill you in on the situation in Northern Ireland is that much like Wales and Scotland, Northern Ireland did not adopt the same approach as England and held back. And then the Northern Ireland Executive released their 5-step plan last week. They were very clear that there would be no time frame to the plan. And would just bring in steps that as they saw fit. In that plan, there are a number of sectors. So I've just put up 2 on the slide here. So family and community, and sport, culture and leisure activities. There's a number of other sectors like work and things, but I've deliberately kept it to the ones that probably are of most interest. The big thing that they announced this week on the 19th of May was that groups of 4 to 6 people who do not share a household can meet outdoors. Now, that's a very significant departure from other parts of the UK where that only very small groups of people, 2 people or whatever, can meet. So that was quite a release that happened just this week. And already, we're hearing of people meeting up with others in outdoor places. The second part of that step 1, they said, was that outdoor spaces and public sport amenities could open, so people could now start doing other activities rather than just walking, running and cycling. I'll come back to that in a minute. One of the important things to understand in Northern Ireland is that the steps don't necessarily apply at the same time in each sector. So for example, in the family and community one, there is another part of step one, which I haven't put up on the slide, which is that you can visit immediate relatives in their home, provided you can do social distancing. But they've said that's not appropriate yet, so they haven't released that. So you can meet 4 to 6 people outdoors, but you can't still visit someone in their home, even though they're both part of step one. So that's one of the difficulties. So if they say step one is open, it doesn't mean everything in step one is open. The second thing then is that they have been very vague about what activities you can actually do. So for example, I've highlighted in yellow there the some water activities, but they have not said anywhere what those some water activities are. And the impression we're getting is it's being left to individuals and probably sports and governing bodies to actually make up their mind about what can be done within the guidance and what can't be done. So if you go to the next slide, please, that would be great. So just to give you a bit of a position about what is happening in Northern Ireland, we have, as part of the Outdoor Recreation Action Plan, developed a number of forums and groups. So one of them is the National Outdoor Recreation Forum, and that brings together all the voluntary sector organisations across the province. And that's been really positive. It's taken a wee while to get up and off the ground. We have an independent chair of that. And that group put together a series of recommendations on easement back in April. They worked on that and then sent it to the ministers for Department for Communities and for Department for Agriculture and Environment on the 1st of May. So really the voluntary sector was quite well ahead of the game in this. And the impression is that quite a few of those recommendations seem to have been listened to. The key messages within that were stay local, stay safe, and stay apart as the outdoors is going to be opened up. Then, led by the Department of Agriculture and Environment and Rural Affairs, there have been set up this strategic outdoor recreation group that's been going for quite a while, and there's been a number of meetings since COVID to try and develop guidance and support for land managers. In fact, there was a meeting yesterday and the day before. And my understanding is that they are going to try and develop some clear messages with stakeholders and the various representative bodies. That still hasn't been published yet. So one of the challenges is that the outdoors is now open for people to do certain things and meet other people, but those messages haven't actually been put out yet. Nor are all the sites open. And we understand that the hope is to get some of the sites open by the end of May. And finally, ourselves in Sport and I, we have been developing a framework for the resumption of sport in Northern Ireland, but that has gone to the Minister for final approval. But the reality is, while that's gone to the Minister for final approval, sports, governing bodies of sport are now putting out their guidance on their own websites and telling people what they can and cannot do. So in a sense, the framework is going to be helpful, I think, for the sports who can't operate yet, but I think for a lot of the outdoor sports, they're already ahead of the framework. If you could go to the next slide, please. I've probably covered some of this stuff in what I've said already. I think one of the things in Northern Ireland that we have experienced is there's been a really high level of compliance. There really has been no sense that people are overdoing things. I live in the Mourne Mountains area. It's our main mountain area, and it's one of the real hotspots for outdoor recreation. And to be honest, I've been out and about and on my bike, and it's been really quiet. The car parks, there's been a few cars in them, but they're not full by any means. So the numbers have been low, which is very reassuring. As I mentioned, most of the outdoor sports governing bodies now are producing really good guidance on their websites based on the 5-step plan from the executive and from the announcement on the 19th of May. So things are happening quite quickly. Just a sort of a typical Northern Ireland thing is that one minister went off a bit maverick and announced that the public angling estate would be opened on the 18th of May. The body responsible for the public angling estate weren't actually aware this announcement was coming, so they had to get the site open over the space of a weekend. So those are all open, but the car parks to those sites aren't open. Now that's presented a major problem because now anglers are now parking on the roads outside them and walking in, blocking roads and things. And our understanding is those car parks will be open towards the end of the month. As I said, most organisations are working to reopen their sites by the end of May. There was an update yesterday or the day before, I lose track now, to confirm that there is no limit on the travel when you're permitted to leave home. So you're allowed to leave home to do your exercise, to meet other people, and there's now no limit in travel for that. So I live in the south of the province. If I decided I wanted to meet someone up in the north and on a beach on an open space, there is nothing to stop that from happening. I think, though, the message that we still want to promote is stay local and don't actually make big efforts to drive long distances. However, legally, there's no limit to stop you. And finally, I just wanted to plug a little bit of work from Outdoor Recreation NI that have done some really interesting insights on how people's perceptions of outdoor recreation in Northern Ireland during COVID and what they hope or hope not to do as a result of it going forward. So we'd encourage people to get onto that website and have a look at what those findings were. It is fascinating. Guys, that's it from me. Try to keep that as brief as I could. I think I used more than my allocated -10 minutes. Thanks, Chris.
You've done well, Mike. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the plug, the checks and the post. So we're about 10 minutes over, and I'm just conscious that a number of the speakers have been very good to give up their time this morning and are needing to pop off to other meetings. So I'm going to just take 3 questions. There's been loads of questions in the question panel, and the presenters have been popping on and answering them as well. So we'll get a transcript of those Q&As off to you in the evening as well. So you'll get them all. If they haven't had a chance to answer them, we'll try and get those picked up over the next couple of days. But I just wanted to ask three questions now when we're online before we sign off and all head for our lunch. So like I said, feel free to ask more questions and we'll try and get them answered for you. So the first one's going to be for Lee. Lee, there was a volley of questions come in during your presentation, so you're obviously meeting a great need of the industry there. Quick questions around is the website, is what you're doing going to be available in all nations? Is there a cost? Do they need to be a member of ORN? Will users need to have the OS app?
Okay, yeah, so it's absolutely free. The information is going to sit in the Get Outside website, which it does attract a very large kind of population of people looking at it. So we're going to feel very confident we'll be able to get these messages out very, very quickly. It's absolutely free for both kind of visitors and normal general public to use, and it's absolutely free for any partners if they want to put information up on that site. Get Outside is a kind of a social good initiative that we've started, and it's just designed to kind of bring a lot of the information together in one place. So the more the merrier as far as we're concerned. We're happy to signpost all of that information back to your own websites as well, just to kind of make sure that people are getting a good, accurate level of information, from the source. So yep, that's all going to be there, and it's certainly it's not really linked into OS Maps at all. This is just a kind of, as I said, a social good website. We're putting the information up there and then moving our kind of visitors to the correct levels of information and then onto your website. So that's literally all it is. It's completely free.
Greatly, thank you very much. The next question, I'm going to come to Pippa, who's answering questions for Natural England on behalf of Adele. Are you there, Pippa?
I'm here still, yes, Chris.
Great. So this question's come in from Andrew Watson from Dartmoor National Park. And so given the scenes of overcrowding last weekend and gridlock on the Devon coast yesterday, is there any consideration been given to limiting how far people can travel for exercise, or our more prominent public message about staying local?
That's a difficult one for me to answer, given the number 10 messages, you can travel as far as you like. So there have been a lot of representation made about the fact that some sites are getting very busy. And I dare say number 10 have been looking at the pictures of lots of people on beaches and wondering whether or not they should be doing something about it. But that's the level at which the decision would be made, which unfortunately I don't have a direct line into. So sorry, I can't answer that one.
No, that's fine. Thanks for the candid response. It's very good. Nick, are you there? Nick from Woodland Trust?
I am, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yeah, great. A quick question, more practically based question, or two questions for you actually. One is, when will the VSG guidance note be published? When will that be ready?
Well, we can both answer that because I'm literally working on it this afternoon. I've got final comments from various people. I'm going to add those in, be a few hours work, give that to you. I'm going to, when I do that, I'll probably ask the board to have a quick look at it as well at the same time, but with a very short turnaround. I would suggest that gives you and the graphic designer tomorrow to work on it. So my view will be early next week, but it'll then be in your hands, Chris. So what do you think?
Yeah, let's go for Monday afternoon. We can do it.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. The last one, more practical, regarding the opening of toilets. What's the rationale for cleaning twice per day? Why not more? Why not less?
Well, twice per day is guidance that I've seen in various different sort of government documents and all the rest of it. But what I said as part of it was it all comes down to the individual risk assessment. If a particular landowner or controller believes they should do it more, they can. It's only guidance. It's not hard and fast rules. Great, thank you very much. Conscious folks that we're 15 minutes over schedule. A lot of our presenters have had to move on to other meetings and so on. So thanks very much for sticking with us. It's been great to see such a great retention rate in delegates during the webinar. As I said, we will be circulating the recording on the YouTube channel, and we'll be sharing that with you in the ORN e-zine. We'll also be trying to get as many of those questions answered as possible via the ORN e-zine and getting that out to you. We'll be looking at other ideas for webinars as we move forward over the coming months. I think we'll be operating in this scenario rather than physical meetings for the near future. So please do send ideas into Elizabeth in the Secretariat about other ideas and other ways we can deliver webinars for you. Be delighted to hear feedback on today, good and bad. I think some innovation is difficult to do. So we've had a few technical issues today, but we got there in the end. We'll sharpen our pencil for the next time, and we'll try and be more effective. But delighted we got through all the presentations. Thanks again to all those who presented, and thanks to all who worked hard behind the scenes to get us all there in the end. So I'm going off for a pint. I'll let you all go for your lunch, and hopefully see you all physically in the near future, and hopefully see you all again at the next webinar. Thanks a million, folks. Cheerio.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, cheerio, everybody.